Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us this afternoon for an interview with Benji Rogers, the CEO of Pledge. So hi, Benji, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you.
So I'm Andrea Leonelli. I'm the founder of Digital Music Trends, which is a media site, essentially, where I produce podcasts, essentially, on the music industry. Every week, there's a podcast covering the news that have happened around the world, and I get great guests on, including Benji, sometimes, to talk about what they think about it. But let's get back to Pledge. So how many of you in the room know what Pledge is? Awareness level?
Well, that's a good showing.
Okay, about half. So I would think, first thing, Benji, maybe give us a quick intro on the company for those who may not be familiar with what you guys do yet.
Sure. So I founded the company about 6 years ago, and it's an online direct-to-fan platform. And what we do is we help artists pre-sell their albums long lead in advance. They offer their fans a window into the experience of the making of an album. So basically, an artist says to their fans, be a part of the making of this album. And from day one, you get access to a special part of the site that has early mixes, live tracks, demos, video blogs, kind of shares the process of the making of the album. And at the end, a part of the profits can be given to a charity of the artist's choice. So the idea is the artist wins. They get to make the album of their choosing and the way of their choosing with whom they want to work with. The fan wins because they get to watch more than just an album being made. And someone shows up at the end with a check for charity. So if all goes to plan, everyone's happy.
Nice.
And as long as the album's good.
And in terms of how the idea has evolved since you started, it's been a while, and the company has grown so much over the last 2 years. So what are the main differences between where you started and where you are today? Yeah,
I mean, where we started was, it was originally a place for sort of, indie artists to make an EP, kind of like, it was definitely for emerging bands. But I always knew that it would work for a larger type of band. The first she wasn't major label artist at the time, was Tina Diko, a Danish artist, and she worked with us, and she did a really successful soundtrack for a film, which ended up coming out on Universal in Scandinavia and was a big success. And then we got our first #1 in the UK, I think our second year around, and then we basically have something in the top 10 or 20 every week now. And that's, I think what it really emerged from is we were very much pegged into being a crowdfunding platform at first, and it's taken me all of my effort and will to kind of convince people that we're more than that. And I think it's probably bad marketing, but we've just hired a new head of marketing, so hopefully that will be fixed. But ultimately what it was people would see, oh, it's kind of like a Kickstarter, but for music. But I always felt that it was way more than that, and it's actually a marketing platform. So an artist like, a band like Weezer or Rufus Wainwright isn't necessarily raising money to make an album. What they're doing is they're inviting their fans into the process of the making of an album. And we built some social syndication technology. So when an artist creates what we call an update, it syndicates out in a preview form to the artist's Facebook and Twitter, but also to the fans' Facebook and Twitter. So when Rufus Wainwright does an update from the studio on the making of his new opera, Stephen Fry, the comedian out of the UK, retweets a preview of that video to his 8 million followers. So it's really a syndication tool. And so major and indie labels started to use it more as a marketing platform. And now it's become a music community where the average fan spends $61 per transaction. So it's a very high-spending fan base. And as I say to a lot of artists who are releasing records, if it's not in the ecosystem, people simply won't see it. So that would be a shame.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting because obviously there's a big difference between what you do and pure crowdfunding, but there's also been a little bit of controversy around that. I mean, there was a piece on Hypebot a couple of months ago where they were talking about the fact that some of the best crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter, like Amanda Palmer's one, for example, could, in a sense, be construed also as a D2C fan just because of the way that she portrayed herself through the campaign. But that's sort of the best bits of crowdfunding brought into some of the tools that you have, but not necessarily the other way around, right?
Yeah. So Clyde picked up on a point, which was basically that I'm not a fan of crowdfunding for music, and there's a real simple reason for that. I think that if you say to your fans, so I view that there's three things. There's crowdfunding, there's direct-to-consumer, and there's direct-to-fan. And there are three separate kind of channels. Crowdfunding comes at, and I'm a fan of crowdfunding for other things, just for music it's not the right fit for me. If you say to your fans, give me $30,000, and then I will go make an album. That sends a very specific and clear message. The first thing you see on that page on a crowdfunding campaign is a financial amount. And the majority of the artists that we wanted to work with didn't want to show or place a false financial value on their work. Because for every Amanda Palmer who raised $1.2 million using the system, there were those that failed to do so. And what really got me on this track was we were watching the first Kickstarter campaigns roll out when Pledge was around, when we were first launching. And I watched bands have to message, we're $10,000 away, and when we hit $20,000, we'll do X, Y, and Z. And it was very much, so I guess crowdfunding done badly is a really painful ask.
Yeah.
Crowdfunding done well focuses on the experience, but then it's over immediately. So our campaigns last sometimes 6 months to a year. And my contention was, why start something, run it for 30 days, end it, and then have to create an entire other direct-to-consumer offering for the same record? Why not? Why isn't it part of one full sweep? So an artist, the ideal campaign is the first update you see is an artist walks into the studio, says, be a part of the making of my album. You get access to the special content that only for you pledgers. And when their album comes out, you hear it first, it sound scans, it's part of an entire ecosystem. And what I found was, also to do with crowdfunding, again, I'm a fan of it. I've pledged or backed things on these platforms before in the technology space. If you're proof of concepting something, it's great. Yeah. But again, to put your music up and say, we are publicly worth $27,500, yeah. And if we don't get it, you don't get a record, to me, it just sends the wrong message forward. And to Clyde's point, he's a very smart guy, and he wanted me to definitely answer him, which I didn't, sadly, but I had an email composed, but you know, we love him. But ultimately what it was to me was, if you push your financial value ahead of your music, like if you go to the average crowdfunding site, there's no play button to listen to anything. Yeah. It's a pure financial thing, and that's, and again, you know, you can talk about the community you're building, all that stuff along it, but ultimately, if you don't hit 30 grand, nothing happens. Whereas for the majority of our campaigns in our kind of higher tier of artists, there's no financial target anyway. And we made a decision in the first couple weeks of being in existence to change that. Unfortunately, what happened was everyone grabbed hold of that and said, you're a crowdfunding company, but for music. I mean, the Kickstarter for music. And I'm very complimented. And I send campaigns directly to Yancey, the founder of Kickstarter, and to Slava from Indiegogo, and to Brian from Rocket Hub that don't fit our model. Because if an artist comes to us and says, I want to raise 50 grand, I say, well, you should talk to Kickstarter if you want to raise money. Yeah. If you want to engage your fans and make, you know, because ironically, we found that I think it was 37% of an artist's income through our platform came after the 60-day mark would have closed. So we still use those same drivers, but we use them as percentages. So to leave that money on the table seemed pretty disastrous. So yeah, sure. Yeah, so we just had to adapt the model.
No, it makes sense, and I think, you know, one of the lines that I picked up on, a line that was on an article that was around Pledge and other platforms on Tone Deaf. It was Steve McKay, the guitarist of 12 Foot Ninjas, and he said, you know, this is a transaction, not a handout. Yep. And you know, I found that quote really telling, because, and I wanted to ask you actually around musicians that approach Pledge to do campaigns. You know, do they need to be educated around what the platform can provide them? Because some musicians may still come to it with the notion that it might be a handout, or it might be like just money that comes from the fans, but not productize the vision enough.
There are, I mean, how many people here are musicians in a loose way? How many are managers? Labels? Okay, so if you've worked with musicians, you know that some of them are that rare breed of absolute talent and ability to market themselves. And there's a whole bunch that really aren't that. And I say that with all the love because I'm a musician myself. If you give an artist free reign over a platform to do whatever they want, they'll either go for a very clever sell. And Amanda Palmer is a brilliant and intelligent lady, one of the smartest people I've ever come across. And so she understands about getting the right team around her and about how to message it, and she's absolutely amazing at it. And she ran a campaign on our platform as well after her big Kickstarter one, because she wanted to do something a little more low-key and for the fans. So she understands those drivers. Most artists don't. So what we did was we accept all artists, they can sign up, and then one of our team works with them to create and sculpt the campaign to the way it should be. So one of the reasons that our artists come out looking pretty good in these is because we've worked with them. I don't view us as just a platform, sign up and just do it yourself. Because ultimately what we get is this myth in DIY that, just anyone can do it. How hard could it be? You know, learning about price points, mechanical royalties, shipping stuff overseas, breakage, all that kind of thing is something that our team are well versed in. So we built a scalable platform from within to where one person can handle hundreds of campaigns at once, because they all launch in different phases. So we tried to create something that was beyond just a sign up and do this. And I know that with the crowdfunding platforms, what I kept seeing was these campaigns were like $30 for a guitar pick. And you're like, no one's stopped to think this through, that like, you know, hold on, if you know what the average price point should be, if you know what the average album sells at, if you know you need to sound scan in X, Y, and Z countries, why don't you just, you know, that's part of what we get paid for. I'd love to just have a platform that just took money in all day long, but that wasn't really in my future, it seems. I'll work on something else, but I think what I saw is that failed crowdfunding campaigns could have been successful direct-to-fan campaigns, and they just needed someone to look at them, give it that attention and love, and say, hang on a minute. Refocus your ask here. You don't need $50,000. You need 500 fans to pre-order your record and to share that they have done so. And so our syndication technology is 17% of all of our traffic coming in. And we're seeing now between 30 and 40% of transactions on the average campaign coming from our own user base. And we're still small. So as that grows, what we'll see is an ecosystem emerging within it. And the best part is the artist owns all their data out of the back end. So all that goes into it comes out to the benefit of the artist and the label who puts the music in.
And so let's talk about the way you engage fans, or artists engage fans to pledge on the platform. So you talked about marketing, email marketing. The site itself is a big driver, because if people pledge for one campaign, they're more likely to go and explore other artist campaigns. Artists obviously reach out through their fan bases, through friends and family. But one of the things that seems to be pretty untapped is the idea of trying to move fans from less active forms of consumption of music into more active ones, like pledge. For example, we've seen Spotify dipping their toes in the D2C sort of space.
Finally.
With first with the Topspin partnership, and now with the Bandpage one, so that if you haven't heard about this, Bandpage has now got a link through to Spotify, so that you can actually feature a few of your products on your artist page on Spotify if you do all the back-end work to do so. So do you envisage a future where it might become easier for artists to do similar things, but with a platform like Bandpage, so that Spotify would enable bands to say, on my Spotify page, I want to feature my pledge campaign. I want to drive fans there, because that could become really a powerful driver of revenues for them. Yeah,
2.5 years ago, I wrote a blog, and I was basically, I was on a panel and I was asked this question: if you could change anything about the music industry with a wave of a magic wand, what would it be? And on the panel there was various things, like we go back to selling CDs like we did in the 90s, or it was like, concert revenues would double. It was, and I remember it just popped into my head. It would be that you could offer the experience of the making of an album through exclusive offers in a streaming skin. It was literally as simple as a link to a pre-order campaign from a stream. And what was started to unfold, and I remember saying, we will pay you to let us do this. Just, we've built the technology. Just when someone queries an album, see if there's if we have a corresponding campaign, and pull the best bits into the Spotify skin. That way, when you're listening, if you choose to dig into that artist, you'll see what they have on offer. What that turned into about 1.5 years later was the rudimentary stuff, whereby if you listen to the Pixies, all of a sudden you would see a t-shirt offer. And that was really not the point. Because if I'm listening to a song, it doesn't mean I want a t-shirt. That's D2C, direct to consumer. The layer that I love, and this is what we're now able to do through the Bandpage Connect, is our first experiment was with an artist called Terry Clark, Universal artist out of Nashville via Canada, strangely. And when you listen to her music on Spotify, we surfaced a handwritten lyric sheet, cowboy boots from a tour that she'd done, a listening party in a specific location, and all of that was tied into a pre-order of the new album that had not yet been finished being recorded. So you're listening to the back catalog of hers, you've gotten to that page, and it's surfacing things that you can buy that do not yet exist. It's that Spinal Tap strangeness. If you can't promote something that doesn't exist, well, I think that's not true anymore. So we saw a really, I need more data on this before we're going to get public with it, but we saw an incredible conversion from listening and accessing that page to buying products for records that did not yet exist. Selling an album that already exists, or a t-shirt or a piece of merch for something that's already happened, is not the game here. It's about projecting forward. And what I believe fundamentally is that the streaming services will be the largest drivers of direct-to-consumer and direct-to-fan sales as we move forward. Because what they'll know is, if you've streamed a song 10 times, you're a super fan, you'll probably want X, Y, and Z. And if we surface those offers, that's when the game changes. Again, if the average fan on our platform pledges $61 per transaction, and let's say you've had 3 million people hitting your streaming page, and we can convert on the low end 5 to 10%, that's a really incredible number for most artists that are going to be out there. And I think that we can actually convert a lot higher when we work with the placement. My sadness is that, you know, I think the streaming services should have built these gateways themselves and said, this is our gift to the independent artists, to take away that toy of, you know, not being paid enough. And I'm just so happy that in its first rudimentary phases, we're now able to surface campaigns live in these skins. We've got them in Shazam, we've got them in Rhapsody, we've got them in Spotify and a couple other places. And the data looks really compelling so far. But it's not about just offering a direct-to-consumer T-shirt or, you know, God forbid, a CD where you're listening to the damn record. You want to offer something that you're listening. You know, the ideal is you listen to Orgasmatic by Buzzcocks 50 times. You can pre-order a handwritten lyric sheet or a signed vinyl from the album that comes out in 6 months' time. And that sounds like a strange thing, but if you're a super fan like I am, that's exactly what I did. I spent $200 on Buzzcocks simply because I was aware of it. When we looked at their streams, millions of people had streamed their music that had no idea that their music was available. And when I ask the artists that we've worked with about this, they say a really interesting thing. They say the streaming services are in the way of our interaction with our fans, because they can't access them. So what you have to do is you have to surface for those fans what is interesting and compelling for them, bring them to a place where you can share that data, and ultimately the streaming services look great because they will become a massive driver of revenue for things like tickets and for things like, you know, signed merchandise. And that's not a mass consumption. That's not for everybody. Obviously, you know, streaming is about reaching a big bulk volume, but this is about the artists themselves having an ecosystem that they can learn, that they can leverage. And so ultimately, the back catalog can be leveraged to literally fund and create new albums before they exist.
Sure, and bringing it back to sort of a more practical level, of course, we're talking about the future here, but as of today, you've now managed campaigns of all sizes and shapes, and we have quite a few artists and managers in the room. So when it comes to deciding the scale of your project and figuring out whether you can do it completely independently, whether you're at the stage where you might need to start hiring some people or a label services company or anything like that, how do you come in? How do you help bands sort of understand where they're at and what kind of campaigns they should be aiming for?
Sure. So we can basically predict with about an 80 to 90% degree of accuracy how much an artist will raise in pre-sales before the campaign's begun. We normally exceed that by 130% of what they wanted. So it definitely is very successful. We've got enough data now to where we can say, based on your Facebook, Twitter, email, we project you will do this if you offer this number of updates, and each update we have now a quantifiable dollar amount on. So one of the things that I say is, whatever happens, don't go to a label with demos, go to a label with sales. So what we've seen is artists will launch a campaign, pre-sell 2,000 to 3,000 records, then go to a label and say, hey, help me reach more people. And one of the worst things I've seen is a label say, oh, we can't do anything with you because you've cannibalized the sales that we would do. And this is my fundamental belief. It is not a label's job to sell to the hardcore fans. That's the artist's job. Labels are there to sell to everybody else. And so what would you rather do? Take a $200,000 risk on an artist that's pre-sold 5,000 records, or take a $200,000 risk on an artist that's basically got some demos saying, help me do this. So we've empowered artists and managers to run these things. And if they choose to hire in label services, or if they choose to use distributors, whatever it is that they want, we're just pre-selling records before they exist. So ultimately, if Universal wants to offer you a deal, it will be a better deal if you've got pre-orders in your pipeline. I'm having this conversation with an artist right now. I'm on Instagram watching them, and I'm seeing them in the studio. And I emailed the manager. I'm saying, where's the button? I want to sign test pressing. I want a handwritten lyric sheet. Where is it? I'm watching them, but what can I do with this information? Or the worst case scenario is the press release that says so-and-so announces they're going into the studio. New album will be out in April. And what do I do with that? It's useless information. It doesn't bring me anywhere. And so they'll even put the track listing or the album artwork. I think we have to change the way, we got to look at just how the internet works. If you send me information, let me do something with it, immediately right there and then. I've said this to managers 1,000 times in my brief career in the music industry in this digital tech space, is your band's in the studio, here's my credit card, I want to give you $200. I want to sign CD, sign vinyl, test pressing, poster, where do I pay? And then there's this fumble for like, but it's not coming out till September, the album's, we're a year away, so what? Why stop someone who wants to do something right there and then? Why make them wait for an arbitrary 2 to 4 week window, and then for 2 weeks to 3 weeks afterwards wait for it to be, what does that mean anymore? It's just not the nature of the beast that we live in. And as far as, that goes into the streaming services, why would I buy something that I can listen to immediately? You're offering someone, if it's buy my CD that you can listen to here, it's a very strange thing to say to a digital native. It's a very odd thing. They look at you like, interesting, why would I do that? So you see things like Taylor Swift windowing her release into Spotify. Why? Because that will generate sales. Sure. What I would have said is, why not offer for sale 6 to 8 months beforehand in various deluxe formats with listening parties, with all this kind of stuff going on, and then hit it out of the gate same day on Spotify, on every means of communication you can humanly get your hands on. Yeah. I think it's just, we've just got to rethink the way that records are released, because it's not the best experience for fans.
Sure. I mean, I would love to see a major artist do that. Of course, we have to wait until the first major artist actually decides to take the jump and try that out. The results could be very interesting on that. So looking at some of the larger scale projects that you've undertaken and deals that you've made, for example, a few months back in April, you announced a partnership with the agency group. Yep. So essentially that gives the agency group access to Pledge as a platform and to your support team, but also you can recommend artists to them as well. So looking at a deal like that with an agency that has 2,000 plus major artists, how did that shape up over the last few months? Have you seen any interesting things happen from that over the last 6 months and that you can tell us about?
What was interesting on that was it was the first time an agent had kind of approached us, and the way that Natalia and her team were looking at it was really interesting. They viewed us as a way to extend the life of a tour for an artist, to offer products around the touring ecosystem as it was, and as a way to kind of pre-sell tickets and pre-sell experiences around it. So they also wanted to see who was popping and emerging on our platform. Obviously not everyone, we're an amazing barometer of where an artist is in their career. So the first artist that they started to work with us, they were basically saying, what did you expect they would do? What did that artist do? And then we basically make the introduction and kind of take it from there. It hasn't, it's a difficult one, and it's one that I want to see more time on it first.
Of course, yeah.
Because the reality of it is that The major artists are quite tough to get into the system. They have a way and a set process of doing things, which we're slowly, getting into. Weezer was one of our bigger artists, and that's a Universal Republic band. Black Veil Brides. We've got Korn on the platform now. We've got a lot of these larger artists doing it. So what I think will happen eventually is we'll see that the recording cycle and touring cycle will blend into each other, and that you will offer experiences around the release of an album and tour that are going to augment it for everybody. That's certainly what the intention behind the Tag deal was. And Tag's taken on the first few Pledge artists, which is really amazing, so they're going to start to get on the road soon. They took on artists that were still making albums, which was a very cool thing, so we're going to watch that, that unfold. It was a very forward-thinking deal, though. I was really quite amazed by that. Natalia's a very smart lady. Nice. And a nice hockey fan.
And so looking at Pledge as a company, as a business, I'm sure there's quite a few entrepreneurs in the room as well. You expanded pretty quickly. You've got offices all over the place and people on the ground. Even if there's not an office, there's a representative of Pledge somewhere in Europe and in the States. So how have you managed that expansion? And are there, any recommendations or things that you would tell people that are doing the same thing? Maybe avoid doing this, or we maybe could have done this better. Is there anything that you would change about the way you went about it?
It's really messy on the inside. I'll say that. I think one of the best things you can do is project a beautiful strength and veneer and clothe it as nicely as you can, but it's a shit show in the middle. No, it's we basically. I think a year into existing, our chairman said to me, "What's your mission statement?" And this is I formed this with 3 of my best friends in a basement of a bar, and then we moved into the basement of a building in the West End, and we basically modeled it on a pure tech model. And within about 2 weeks, we realized that wasn't going to work, that we had to interface with the music industry. So a lot of what would drag a tech company down, dealing with licensing or talking with these people, we didn't want to touch. We ended up hiring someone from the music industry who actually was a massive door opener. And the reason that we have now top 10, top 20 albums every week is because we made that effort to integrate into the music industry. And so when our chairman said, "What's your mission statement?" I had no idea. I've never done anything like this before. I made most of it up while we were going along, but I surrounded myself with people who were 10 times smarter than I was. And I found that all of the entrepreneurs I spoke to were so giving of their time, and they were so helpful. They viewed it that all boats would rise if we all got it together. And I asked incredibly stupid questions. I remember when I first sat with our accountant, she looked at me like I was an idiot, and I said, "I'm not leaving this room until I understand what's on this page." And she took endless patience with me. And what emerged was an incredibly, we have an amazing family atmosphere at the company. Our campaign managers take their job really seriously. If a campaign isn't going well, it hurts them, you can see it. And we collectively pool to make these things go better. We view this very much from the perspective of the artist, that if we fuck up, they fuck up too. It's like we're shoulder to shoulder with them. And that has not left. And when I was asked to create this mission statement, I was like, okay, so I went away for about a week and I thought about it. What I came up with was, our job is to get, point 1, our job is to get as much money into the hands of artists in the shortest possible time. Any delay to that is a threat to our business. The second was, because things can be excellent, they have to be. And the third thing was, we're not subject to what was, only to what works. And what that meant was, when someone said to you, "No, that's not how it works. We go through this process here," we would listen to it, honor it, and respect it, but ultimately, we were going to go and find what works. And it required a restlessness and a resilience to people telling you, "No, no, no." They pat me on the shoulder, "Benj, great idea, but listen, this is how it works." I was told for 4 months we couldn't process credit cards. And all I knew was that this thing had to exist for the artists and labels for the future. It was pointless otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And so looking at how, obviously, Pledge has got a big emphasis on digital releases and physical releases. In any case, there's some sort of creation of an album or a video or something creative and digitally they can be distributed in a digital format, essentially. Are you seeing more and more people come up to you trying to fund projects that may not be directly digitally distributed, or are you shying away from those kinds of campaigns at this moment? There's a lot of different types of art that happen on Pledge, and they are all ancillary to the main release. But some artists might want to do those as the primary mean of distribution. Yeah,
we're not good with things like technology. I definitely think that that's very much in a funding space. We're really good with releases of records, with tours. We're doing a great thing with Ingrid Michaelson right now. We did some amazing live stuff with Deertick. We're great with movies about music and books about music. One of our biggest campaigns was ABBA. Massive campaign for a book and DVD with them. And those are some super fans. Wow. That was the first time where when we would reveal pictures from the book that was coming out, ABBA fans wrote to us saying, please don't reveal it, you'll ruin it for when it arrives. It was really like the opposite of the Uber fan. We're trying to remain a music company and a music technology company. We're trying things like guitar pedals, we're trying things like software. But what we find is that we have a base of music fans who want to support musicians making music more than they want stuff. So the way they might buy a handwritten lyric sheet, or they might buy it, but what they really want is to watch something unfold. So we're doing a very cool, guitar pedal project right now, and I know I've bought, I think, 3 of them, because I need 3 guitar pedals. But I think we're really good at that release cycle. We're really good at integrating it into the label structure as and when needed. And so we're going to try and remain core to that as a music company.
Sure, of course. And the last thing I wanted to ask you was about one of the models that's sort of coming up over the last 12 months as something that people are interested in, which is a sort of a more subscription-y type service. And so we've seen Patreon. If you haven't heard of it, Patreon is a platform that allows podcasters like myself, or journalists and even musicians to create an ongoing subscription that fans make to each piece of content that's created by the individual, or to a monthly subscription for any given piece of content that they would create in that space of time. So those are interesting. It's a really interesting model. But there's been I've seen people argue whether that's applicable to the music industry or not, because it does require an ongoing effort that may not quite be relatable by artists. You might not be able as an artist to create a set number of pieces of content per month, or to really fulfill that obligations towards fans. So what is your take on that? Is this something that you think could become a functionality, like a part of the package in the future, or what's the stance?
One of the most beautiful things about creating anything digitally or on the web is the second you put it out there as what you think it is, an artist will bend it and shape it to their own use. We looked long and hard at subscription from the word go. And one of the things that we found was, if we run a 3 to 4 month campaign and we need to get 4 to 6 updates out of an artist, that's difficult. Multiply that by 12 months, trying to get one specific thing for one layer, then adding another layer. I think it's amazing for these YouTube stars, but ultimately, it's nothing that really couldn't be done with a PayPal button and a subscription. So I do applaud Jack for what he's built, and he's an incredible entrepreneur. But what I know from working with thousands of artists day in, day out, is you can get them to tweet, maybe. You can oftentimes get them to Facebook post, Instagram possibly, create YouTube videos sometimes. But as part of your social layer, like I did some analysis, you're looking at like 130 pieces of content average per month, which a good artist will be doing. That's a bunch of Twitter every day, a bunch of Facebook, Instagram, maybe some YouTube, maybe some We Heart It, maybe some Snapchats, and Tumblr. We try and get 4 pieces of content per month for updates for pledgers, and we have to remind artists to do that. Now picture if you've got 1,000 subscribers that you owe this content to, financially speaking, every month, and you miss a couple. I think what it is that I'm not crazy personally about the idea of parsing out that my music is worth this much at this time. And also I think it's at odds because people subscribe to their music service to get all the music that they want at any one time. So I think it's great for YouTube creators. I think that's really powerful, and YouTube put that same tool and mechanism into its own skin. But I do worry about the update deficit that will start to happen, because ultimately, if a few of these goes wrong, you'll just be like, why am I putting $10 a month into this when I never get anything out of it? When on Spotify or Tidal, I get all of my music in high res when it comes out anyway. So I think it's yet to be seen. I've seen artists run year-long campaigns with us for like a record club. Buck Cherry's doing it right now, and it's been incredibly successful. But I think also, we gotta remember that one of the things that's very cool is artists create events around their releases, and these can be really compelling. So to have it just be one all-year-long grind might not be as exciting as it comes up, pops down, tour, up, and then down, rest a little bit, come back up again. So I think it's a cyclical thing. So we don't have any plans to turn on subscription at the moment, but obviously we've seen bands hack it by saying, and if you pledge this for 12 months, you will get everything that we create per month. And that doesn't bind them to it. And we've seen sure. fan clubs begin that way as well. So it's
no, I totally get your point. I mean, I really see it work better for podcasters. For example, one of the guys that I follow, Tom Merritt, he's raising 13 grand a month for doing about 15, 20 shows.
I'll subscribe to your podcast.
I don't have a Patreon. Yeah, I'm working on it, but okay. it's kind of, it's a tough one to crack.
Who here's going to give $10 a month?
But yeah, I think we've come to the end of the Q&A in terms of, at least if there are questions. I have plenty more questions for Benji if there's no questions from the audience, but I wanted to open it up in case I can take a few. Anybody can be brave for the first one? I'm sure after the first one it will open up. Anybody got any questions?
I think we answered it all.
Oh, come on, I'm sure there is somebody itching to ask something. No? Okay, then I can go on asking questions. So one of the things that cool. So one of the quotes that I found as well that was interesting was one from one of your artists, Jenny Owens-Young, who recently stated that this is not just about direct to fan, it's also a direct to artist in terms of from the perspective of the fans. And so how do artists manage expectations of fans when it comes to a pledge campaign? And have you seen examples where this worked really well, or where, for example, fans started to ask for more ownership of the release than the artists were prepared to give up in terms of control?
This was another thing with subscription and feeling that fan owns the artist because they're basically supporting them. One of the reasons that we create these campaigns that begin and end is based around that. The artist-to-fan connection is a very strange one, and you've got when we worked with Devo, we saw super fans who will literally tattoo Devo on their bodies in places. And it's incredible. Devo also treat their fans incredibly well. We've also seen things like where we have a block list so that if there are certain stalkers who need to be taken care of, we can do that. Right. We also had to manage fans who, like with Gang of Four, they were upset that Hugo was no longer in the band, so they were just attacking the page. And we had a meeting with management, and I'll share it with you. Basically what we did was, whenever this guy was commenting and going crazy, only he could see the comments because he was logged in, no one else but the band and us could. So he could go and have his rants, and I just kept saying he'll go to Facebook otherwise. So we do have to take those things into account. But what kills me is the music industry does a very strange thing. It creates one standardized product, shoots it out across every single format that it possibly can, gives all of its data to those outlets and retailers, and offers me, the superfan, who would spend 100+ euros on an experience, a free stream. And what's been interesting about watching superfans and how they interact is, in the US, there's about $2.6 billion in their behavior left on the table every year. That was based on last year. But it's actually more likely around $9 billion. And that's because fans want to go in deeper. So for artists that don't want to manage that don't want to deal with it, it's not easy. It's not easy work to do, dealing with these superfans, figuring out what it is that they want, but it's incredibly lucrative. So what I say to the majority of artists is, would you rather pay iTunes 30%, let them keep your customer data, and make an average of $9.99 per transaction, Or would you rather send the first 10 to 50,000 through a platform like ours, get $60 each, keep the customer data, and then send everyone else to iTunes and Amazon? It's two separate things. And if you think about this, the economics of streaming, every person that you send day one to that streaming service, what's the most they can do? What is the maximum potential for that fan who's hitting play? So with someone like Jenny Owens-Young, back to your question, she's saying, artist to fan, I'm going to give you more than you're going to get anywhere else. Fan says, I will show up. That's what the pledge is. That's why we called it PledgeMusic. The pledge is, artist says, I'm going to give you more than you're going to get everywhere else. Fan says, I'm going to show up and I will share what it is. Because it's not just about what those first few thousand super fans will do, purchasing-wise, it's that they are your ambassadors. They are the ones that will share. Jenny's fans are auto-tweeting and auto-posting what she's doing in real time for a record that does not yet exist. So if we just sent all of her fans straight to streaming or straight to a purchase, what's the most they could do? Go to an average major label artist website and try to give them $100, and you cannot do it. It's a really strange thing, and yet I want to. I don't just want the same products, I want a different thing. So again, if you look at it, you've got your direct-to-consumer layer, which is, here are packages, sell them. You've got your direct-to-fan layer, which is a different animal. It's designed for a smaller scale of the fan base, but that type of fan is responsible for 34% of all music spending today as is. Imagine if you gave them more power. It would increase that significantly. Yeah. So we've watched an industry that's going to rely for the future on massive digital growth, and that will happen. But but at the cost of the artists controlling data directly between them and their fans. And that's really where I think we've got to come in the middle. We've got to create scenarios that are win-win for all. A consumer win is I can listen to any song I want at any time, anywhere. A fan win is I can go deeper than that. Because it's not just about the experience of listening, it's about the experience of an interaction that comes from it. I equate it to a live experience. You don't know what'll happen when you go see a band live. You can predict what you think it will be, but you know, if that band's on and they're feeling it and they do 2 encores instead of 1, there's that element of happening. And our campaigns have a very similar feel to them. So direct to fan is about what is going to happen. If you start pre-ordering an album before it exists and you travel along that journey, you don't know the outcome. You'll watch the weird twists and turns. It's like a VH1 behind the music, as we used to call them, but in real time. And so you play with that. That's social media gold. And worse than that, artists are often giving most of this amazing content away for free for records that aren't going to come out for 6 months, and then offering them straight into the streaming skin. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's leaving billions on the table every year across the music industry worldwide.
And we can't forget also that, at least in the US and I believe in the UK, those 50,000 sales that you make are actually chart eligible in week 1. So that's a really important point for artists that are looking to gain some traction in that space, because we all know that numbers are going down in terms of album sales, so it's actually becoming easier to get somewhere in a specific niche chart if you get a good momentum on the
What's been interesting is, of our top 10s and top 20s, we have represented 30% of that first week's number has come from our platform alone. So this is a significant driver in terms of the way those commercials work, which gets radio excited, which it's a momentum builder. Because if you know, yeah, I mean, certain labels I know have signed artists out of our platform because they've seen we have a top 20 today. If we push a button, we're going to get that to a top 10. And that's while the vocals are still being recorded. They know their chart position. So that's an exciting thought.
Awesome. Well, Benji, thank you so much. I think we're out of time, and there's a panel that's going to start in about a couple of minutes in the other room. So I would encourage everybody to go over there and check it out. So thanks so much for your time, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.